and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Paul DePausquale of Tivoli Audio. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course. So I'd like to start out with your upbringing. Where did you grow
Sure.
up, and what would you say your childhood was like?
I grew up in Long Island, New York. Middle class family. Pretty normal life. I mean, I think one of the biggest things though that was throughout my upbringing and childhood and in my family was music. Came from a very musical family.
Hmm,
I have a sibling. We both were, doing music at a very young age. Parents, were always supportive of that. So, had a pretty exciting and art-filled
for sure.
childhood. Yeah.
For sure. Out of curiosity, when you say music, what were you doing yourself as a kid growing up? What specific instrument? What was that like?
So when I was at the age of 4, I actually started dancing,
Okay.
mainly because I was just glued to MTV, right? So I was like
Yeah.
watching guys like Michael Jackson and New Kids on the Block, whatever. So I got really into dancing, and I started doing that for a little bit, and then right around the age of about like 6 or 7 is when I picked up the bass guitar. And then from there, it kind of spiraled. It went from bass to piano, to trumpet,
Hmm,
to guitar. And then, throughout my childhood into my teen years, right around like 15 years old, I was pretty much multi-instrumentalist in all things from percussions to digital recording to synthesizer work and everything. And I was really focused on songwriting. I did that
hmm.
most of my childhood. Yeah.
Amazing. Out of curiosity, where were some of these learnings coming from? And did you take private lessons or in school? Was that like?
Yeah. Some of it was private. Like for example, with the trumpet and drums, uh, and even bass, I did more private tutoring and really learned more of the technical and music theory
Mhm.
and all the kind of classical and jazz backgrounds and upbringings. And then, as far as, my interest into the piano and to singing and to a lot of other instruments, it was kind of just applying those theories and just started to try to teach myself.
Yeah.
Um, to this day, I'm not the best with reading music, even though I went to college and went to, music school and everything. I can't like it's not one of my strong points, but I can write music for all those
Yeah.
instruments, which is a
Wow.
thing.
Yeah. So, just a side note, I played percussion growing up, and I'm kind of the
Awesome.
same as well. Sight reading was always, especially
Art.
once you get into different instruments outside of drum set, that was my specialty, but sight reading can definitely be a challenge.
Oh yeah, it's a challenge, and it always came up as a thing when I was in school, where they're like, "All right, sight read this page," and you're like sweating bullets. You're like, "Oh
Yeah.
my God, I can't do this."
Exactly. I saw you went on to, you mentioned music school. You went on to Berkeley. What led you to going there? Of course, to high music
Yeah.
background. What did you study?
So my whole reason of going to Berkeley was to study music engineering and production.
Hmm,
At that time, this is going back 2003, home studio work. Apple computers were becoming more of an everyday, household name, let's call it,
yeah,
with respect to audio production and film production. And yeah, I wanted to get into the producing world and the contemporary kind of recording arts. And yeah, Berkeley, they had a program that really focused on that, and that's really what led me there.
mhm.
Despite my parents, best interest, they always pushed me to do music, but they were like, "You really want to go to school, for music? Yeah, it's a tough industry."
Yeah.
But yeah, I did, and yeah, I enjoyed it for some years. After that, I moved on to a more technical degree in audio, specifically in audio engineering,
Hmm,
where I got to really learn more about the electronics and acoustics,
hmm.
things that at the time I didn't really think were going to be that, a necessity for me. I thought, oh, I want to produce beats in the studio and work in the record business.
Yeah,
And I thought all those classes to be quite boring. But here we are all these years later, and I used that technical side of the degree way more than anything with
for
Tivoli.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So yeah, when you went to school at this time, what were some of your aspirations before Tivoli, before that opportunity came?
Yeah.
What was that?
I mean, I wanted to be in music business, I mean, I
Yeah.
wanted to be, as a songwriter or as a performer. I was playing in several, groups. I had a band, I was really like trying to figure out, can I do the whole independent artists, go on tour, 90% of your year, write music, try to get involved in licensing deals and the whole thing. I really, that's what I wanted to do.
Yep.
That world though, and that during that time with technology at your fingertips, it changed so dramatically.
Mm.
It became very quickly that it wasn't about like the shows and how many people you had there, or how much buzz you had in your town, or even if your songs were any good. It was like, do you have a MySpace page? How many followers do you have? What is your
Yeah.
YouTube hits like? It went to a whole different direction that I didn't grow up in. And it just kind of, when I finally got the chance to do music, it felt like I wasn't actually prepared for what the music industry was asking for anymore.
Yeah. Interesting.
So I did it a long time. I actually did music pretty much all the way, like as a full time, almost a full time thing. With having a day job, like when I started at Tivoli, I was still doing music as a full time thing, and
Mhm.
obviously needed to afford the habit somehow.
Yeah.
But any weekend I got, any vacation time I got, going on weekend tours to New York or to upstate, wherever, just to do like 3, 4
Mhm.
nights of playing shows and then, do it. And I did that pretty much until I want to say like 2016. Started
Wow.
doing it actively in '03 and did it all the way, yeah, as far as I could.
Incredible.
Uh,
So
yeah.
yeah, getting into kind of this transition to Tivoli, how did this opportunity come up? What led you to going there? And I know it was right after school. Was that correct?
Yeah, it was really much right after school. So one of the things at the college I was, when we were leaving, it was like, oh, we have job placements, and I just had that devil and angel right on my shoulder. It was like I just want to go be in the band and try to be a rock star, and at the same
Yeah.
time, I had my parents being like, you need to get a day job, and so I got this listing for Tivoli, and they needed a customer service person, and it was just answering basic customer service stuff, doing a little bit of sales on the phone. And I thought, all right, it's hourly, it's not like too intensive, it's something that I could like do and then still have my freedom to do
Yeah.
my music. And so that's what it was. Um, and yeah, I started in 2006. And I pretty much did the customer service gig there for, I would say, until 2009 or
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was really getting kind of burnt out on the customer service thing. I was just day in and day out. And, I was starting to think a little bit about, career in the sense of like, okay, music thing isn't really happening. Like we didn't have a hit song yet,
Yeah.
like what am I going to do? And I just, I made a request into the department, the engineering department, and said, look, like this is what I went to school for. Like I really have an interest in this. I like the company. I want to stay. You
Mm.
know, is there an opening in engineering? And at first, it was like engineering was a very secretive club in the company. It was like, I don't know about that, and you
Yeah.
kind of have to impress this guy and that guy, and these guys are really smart, brainiacs, and
Yeah.
legends in what they do. And I just was like, all right, well, let's see, um, and they did. They took me in, and I was a technician.
Mm.
Troubleshooting issues that were coming up on the products in the market. Coming up with solutions, being part of like the product team in terms of when we're running productions, and really learning a lot about applying my interest in audio engineering,
Mm.
but really applying it from a practical sense when it came to how we're designing, developing, testing, QCing, and manufacturing products. So
Yeah.
um, it was really like a huge transition for me, and I started to really think more seriously about like what it is I wanted to do. You
For
know,
sure.
once the rock star dream started to fade a little bit.
For sure. No, I love you've had so much growth, and looking at kind of your resume, the ladder you've climbed within Tivoli. And in starting
Yeah,
small, we typically cover the story of the brand. If you can paint that photo. So Tivoli launched just a few years prior to you joining. What did the brand look like at that point? And what was kind of that reason they launched it, the co-founders?
Yeah, so founder Tom DeVesto and Henry Close, right? So Tom DeVesto was from a lot of companies, worked in Cambridge Soundworks, prior to Tivoli, and was very successful there. And when that kind of came to an end, him and Henry Close, who Henry was behind Cambridge Soundworks, Advent, KLH, a real pioneer when it came to audio, and especially consumer audio. They had this idea, like at that time, audio in the home was becoming like 5.1 systems, a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of like, big controllers. And Henry just had this idea. He's like, I want to do something simple. I want to do something that sounded good, that was simple. It brought him back to his childhood of like AM, FM radio, something that was tactile. And Tom, like the business development and sales guy that he was, that he still is, he really had a knack for saying, okay, well, how do we make this thing more than what it is? And that's where like the design element came in. That's where, the whole distribution model that he discovered. And here you are, 2000, 2001, shows up to CES. This is the story I was told, shows up to CES with this prototype radio. The MP3 player had just come out.
Yeah.
And he's walking around CES saying, like, I'm going to sell millions of these things. And people are looking at him like, dude, it's a radio. Like, what are you kidding me? And 3 years later, I mean, the company was doing 50 million plus globally in radios, right? And at that time, from 2000 to 2006, you're talking about a handful of models. You're talking about our signature Model 1 BT, our PAL BT, a clock radio that we still make called the Model 3, and like one or two other products. So it was not like a huge depth, but I think what made it so successful at the time was that it was simple. It had the appreciation from the audiophile world, and it had a certain level of quality and performance and at a price point that everyday consumers could get into.
Yeah.
And with it was all the different things that other audio companies didn't have. Like we had the colorways and the styles and the wood and the design, and that really set us apart. And then that's what it looked like when I came in. So I'm coming into this thing going like, this is really cool. Like I wasn't a radio listener at the time. I was like everyone else listening to iTunes and MP3 stuff.
Yeah.
But I thought from my days of growing up listening to stuff with my dad with turntables and 8-tracks and things, like I was into analog. So I just looked at this radio and went like, this is awesome. There was a life in that thing that spoke itself much different than just being a product.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting at the time. It still is.
No, I agree. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Tivoli. Like if you see it, I'm looking at one right now and it's insane because it does have that retro, beautiful like look and aesthetic, but it sounds incredible. And as we can talk about in the future or here soon you guys are connecting with Bluetooth now. They're highly advanced products, but just look retro. Amazing.
Yeah.
Centerpiece.
Yeah. That's been our thing, to keep that as our roots, no matter what we do, is the look, the vibe, the feel. You wanted to always have an experience that is so unique for anyone that's experiencing it. So
definitely. So once you joined on board and kind of growing within your role as well, what did product development look like for developing like a new model, for example? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So that was the thing. When I got into engineering, we had just launched. This is in 2008. We launched a product called the Networks radio. And the Networks was a very, very early concept of Wi-Fi internet radio that was built into the box itself. So when I joined in engineering shortly after, we were learning a lot about this product. We were learning like all the things and all the tech and all the customer service, all the user capabilities that we didn't experience from an AM FM radio with 3 knobs. We're now dealing with Wi-Fi interference, all sorts of issues that, we just weren't that well versed in. So my
Mm.
first, my first year there was just like debugging and troubleshooting and living more in like software than I was used to.
Yep.
But what was very apparent at the time is that the company and specifically the engineering department, we knew that not that our time was going to be short-lived with the radios, but we'd have to start doing new things. At that time,
Yep.
even 2009, 2010, we
Mm.
still didn't even have Bluetooth fully incorporated into our product line. So
Yep.
from at that time, it was like, okay, how do we take these benchmark things that we have, the sound, the quality, the design, the build quality, all of it, the ease of use, how do we get all that and start to like build that out into new products that have features that the customers want?
Yeah.
And that was everything from Wi-Fi to Bluetooth to, now we're into, wireless chargings and all sorts of, Spotify and this and that. So
Yep.
but at that time, it was sort of like the point of when I got in. It was me and this other guy that were there, younger guys on the team,
Mhm.
that we helped push that a bit because we were the audience. We were
Yeah.
becoming the audience, and the older guys, granted, widely successful team, and like I said, pioneers in their own way with respects to engineering and electronics and audio.
For sure.
Um, Even some of that new tech was lost on them.
Mm.
So, I was really fortunate at the time. I got the opportunity to really be part of like how do we shift Tivoli to be moving in a modern direction.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Out of curiosity. So once these new models are developed, how do you guys produce them at scale? What does production facility look like, for
Yeah.
example, for you guys?
Yeah. So, all right. So we do all of our concepting. We do all of our designing, and most of the development and things we concepted here in Boston. We've always been headquartered in Boston. We do that here. We do have a team that we have in Asia that works closely with the factory partners that we use.
Mhm.
And so generally our products, from conception to mass production, they can take anywhere from 1.5 to 2 years.
Yep.
Most of this stuff when it comes to like software and user, UX and audio and all that stuff, that's something that our team here in Boston stays very close to. I stay still very close to the audio side of things and still working on the EQ and listening and all that stuff. But generally, we take that thing in phase. We take all the products in phase, so it goes through several phases of prototypes to samples that are off tool. Before that, there's samples that are handmade.
Mm.
And every time we go through those, we're just like tweaking the fit, the finish, making sure the cosmetics look the way we want, making sure that the build quality or the cabinetry or the sound, everything that we thought about from its initial inception on paper,
Yep.
like, is it actually where it should be going? And of course, at some point in there, that's when pricing and money and the whole concept of how we're going to market it and what's the value and can we actually sell it at the right price that we think is the right price for it.
Yep.
And we take that all the way through to when we get to the pre-production schedule. And the pre-production, we start then coming up with samples that are coming off the tools, off the line, that we're using to engage with our partners, our distributors, close, influential network that can actually touch and feel and listen and give us real feedback and
Yeah.
say like, yes, I think we could do this, or we could, maybe you should tweak this, or maybe you should do that. And at that time is when we finally say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to look and feel and work. And all the certification stuff starts to take over because we have to do all that.
Yeah.
And then when we get to the production runs, it's like we're producing generally anywhere at a time. We're producing anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 pieces of any of our models in a few days or a week's time. Generally throughout the year, we're probably on our bestseller, let's say, like our table radio, we're producing over 50,000 pieces a year.
Wow.
Still of an AM FM radio.
Wow.
And we do it in phases, right? Some of the schedule I just kind of gave you was the R&D to new products, but while we're doing that, we're also still in the background, like running production of our current models,
Yeah.
and working on like you know, updates and firmware updates and even tweaks along the way that can help improve the product over time. So we're always kind of like doing new stuff and also tweaking old stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a lot of like leapfrogging throughout the year of different things.
For
But
sure.
yeah.
Love it. Let's get into kind of your own personal development within the company. So started
Yeah.
really in customer service, went into product design and engineering. And
Yeah.
then I'm curious, when was the role of CEO then granted, and how did you approach that once you heard about that?
Yeah. So yeah, so I don't tell this story often.
I
Um
appreciate it.
and I will tell it because I think it's really important to, I think, you know, what your podcast is about here. And I think it's
Totally.
important for entrepreneurs that might, you know, find themselves in difficult places in their life and how they use that to turn it into success.
Yeah.
So in 2010 or 11, I was actually getting jaded on the engineering thing.
Mm.
I what I felt was that, at least at Tivoli, I felt we were the engineers in the back, and we were the guys who were the geeks. You know, we're tweaking, we're fixing, we're coming up with ideas. And really, what I realized, what was moving the needle, was all the sales guys and the marketing guys, right? These are the guys who are coming in the back door every day, have the CEO's ear, and they're like, you know, like, oh, we need to build this. This is what I could sell. I can't sell this. And, you
Yeah.
know, there's almost a lot of like tension usually between engineers and the sales guys.
Yeah.
And often what I thought, what I was looking at the time, the way I perceived it was that it was all just because engineers and sales guys and engineers and marketing guys didn't know how to talk to each other. You
Yeah.
know, it was like two different brains. So I started to really get interested in the idea of like wanting to be out and about and networking and understanding business.
Mm.
Through my time with music and doing the band and doing all that I was developing skills that I didn't even realize at the time. I
Yeah.
was developing how to network, how to sell my product, which was the music, you know,
Yeah.
how to negotiate, how to book gigs, how to do all this stuff, right? So I was like, I have the ability to communicate, to network. I'm a people person. I'm outgoing. I can do this.
Yeah.
And so one day I said to myself, I'm going to leave Tivoli. I literally woke up and I was like, I'm going to leave because I don't think I'm going to be able to do what I think I need to do here.
Mm.
And later that week, I'm telling you, literally 4 days, um, I had a very unfortunate event happen to me. I was actually diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma,
Oh my goodness.
and you know, the world shifts, right?
Yeah.
You're like, okay, this is a whole different thing, and it takes you by surprise. And you know, you realize, okay, I need to slow down. I need to think about my health and my future and everything. So I stayed at Tivoli because, of course, you know, I needed my health insurance. I needed certain things to go through that journey,
Yeah.
and I did. And I stayed in engineering pretty much the whole time. And throughout that time, I really found like some personal time that I was able to share with the CEO at the time.
Hmm.
And we, you know, we would talk about things, and I would give my opinion about what I felt about Tivoli and what was going on in the department and what I didn't like about it and everything.
Yeah.
And and then he just, you know, Tom just asked me, so what is it that you want to do? And I was very transparent. I said, well, I was going to leave before all this, and I really want to get into business. I want to learn business. And he just looked at me and he's just like, well, if you think you have what it takes to be in business, like you'll work for me and you'll do sales. And I thought, like, okay, like that seemed pretty interesting. So
Yeah.
let's see what that looked like. Um, and I tell you, those first couple of months in sales, I was like in over my head. I didn't have the discipline that it took to be in sales, right? To go out
Mm.
there and hustle every day. I thought I did, but I didn't know what to expect. And um, and within 6 months to a year, I found an angle. I started opening channels with this product that most people in the audio industry were never even looking at or thinking about.
Mm.
The dealers and the resellers and all the stores, all the mama papa shops, all the chains, you know, they were already starting to show struggle in early 2010, 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
Online Amazon was starting to come about. And and I just said, you know what? I want to focus on B2B. I want to focus on things that connect the product with people in different ways. So I started thinking about hotel business and selling to hotels. I
Mm.
started finding ways to place the products into HBO and Showtime series.
Wow.
I started trying to do like customs and collaborations with brands, like doing limited editions.
Mm.
And at first, it was like really hard because you were pitching a lot and you weren't getting the success.
Yeah.
And you're thinking to yourself, like, is this going to work? And then, like, 3 years later, you're doing that. I had global contracts with Marriott and Starwood. I had HBO, Netflix, Showtime, buying stuff for their sets, for their shows. We were doing business with partners and companies that most audio brands would never go near. I mean, we were selling in Nordstrom's, we were selling in, Urban Outfitters, we were selling in all these places that
Wow.
like weren't your typical Best Buys and,
Yeah,
and electronic shops, right?
for sure.
And so for me, I realized at that point that I had a real love for the product and I
Mhm.
really cared about it. And I thought something different about it than I think people would see it from face value. I really had a connection with it and I made it work.
Wow.
Um, and so I did that and I was running sales by 2015. I was running the North American sales for Tivoli. Um,
Incredible.
and started to dip my toe into some of the European stuff because we were very dominant in Europe. Just kind of looking into the hotel business there and things and different B2B segments. But then in 2015, there was a huge change in the company. The investment group, we were always, we're a private company, we've always been,
Yep.
but the investment group involved, they just felt like there needed to be a change. And at that point, they made a very big, move with upper management, removed pretty much everybody that was at the top
Mm.
at the time and had ideas to sell it from their portfolio. And myself and now our CFO and dear friend and business partner, Daniel Tanisoff, who was the controller at the time, him and I were looked at like, okay, you're the veterans here now. So, what can we do to resurrect Tivoli into a new light? And it's not to say at the time it was going south. It was just that we had so much more competition by 2015. I mean, you had
Yeah.
Sonos coming out, you had Bose reinventing themselves as a personal audio brand.
Yep.
And then there was more and more new brands every day. It seemed like every other year there was a new audio brand or some headphone company or something.
For
So
sure.
we really, had I think the message was we have to really shift and invent and reinvent and also strip back a little bit. And at that time we were pretty fat as a company. We
Yep.
we were a big company and we had a lot of good things, but also when you get big, you have a lot of more problems and you have
Definitely.
debts and fats and redundancies and things like that. So we went through a couple of tough years there. We were sold to a company that was only really around for a short period of time to like kind of get us through the transition.
Hmm.
Um, and at that time, I went back into product. Even though I was doing sales, I went back into being head of brand and brand development.
Okay.
So still focusing on sales, but kind of getting back into what is it we have to do from a product point
Yep.
to get through a hurdle and what do we do? And that's when like the art line or Wi-Fi line and some other new products that we sell today started to come about.
Mm.
Um, and from there, we performed in 2018 a management buyout with ourselves and a private investor. And at that time in 2018 is when they looked at Dan and I and said, well, no, you guys are the ones who've been keeping this thing going. So they appointed him the CFO and myself as CEO.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Incredible story. Looking back at some of that journey, I mean, a lot of product development, some of the retail expansion that you went into. As CEO, what kind of milestone would you say you're most proud of, even before CEO, like just a part of your journey at Tivoli? What milestone would you say?
I think the thing that sticks out in my mind, and I think a lesson or an experience that I will always carry, I think as a business person and as an individual is what I had to do during the time of all that transition.
Mm.
We had to really be thinking on our toes and problem solving. We didn't have, all the cash at every time we could to throw it at problems and make them go away.
Yeah.
We had to keep integrity in the business. We had to keep employees engaged. We did a lot of changes and we made cuts. We did all the things that they tell you to do when you're, going through transition, but we did
Mhm.
it and we never lost our employee base. Like we never had huge layoffs. I always made sure that we
Mm.
kept the integrity, the heartbeat of what was making us work,
Yeah.
and found other ways and to make things happen the way we wanted to. And when we started to see that it took a while, but once we started to see that it was working, it was just a slow and steady pace.
Yep.
I was really proud because I didn't have a business degree. I didn't have like a background in business. I didn't go to business school. And I started to realize like I was getting some real life business entrepreneurial experience that
Mm.
I don't think you could ever get
Yeah.
in a classroom. Um, and for me, that was like one of the moments when it was like 2019 into 2020. Granted, 2020 was an interesting year for everybody, but in 2019, I started to get this glimpse of what we were doing and what we were talking about, how we were positioning the brand, what we were making, and everything really started to
Mm.
click. And I felt like it was like finally the new chapter had
Yeah.
arrived that we started back in 2015.
Yeah.
You know,
I love
yeah.
it. Well, I like to conclude each episode with this. I think that segue is perfect. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur or someone just growing in their own career, something you've learned, regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
Um, I think what I've learned along the way is probably the same thing that maybe I sometimes have regretted. Always, always believe in yourself. It's sometimes easy to get discouraged, and when you're in an entrepreneurial position, you have to believe in yourself when nobody else does.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe in yourself, then the people around you, your business, colleagues and your employees, they will have a hard time following you. Um, and I really connect with that because everyone can have great ideas, but great ideas only become successful when you have partnerships. Success isn't a solo thing. You need a network. You need
Yeah.
partners and employees and colleagues, and you do that. You get those relationships by communication and being able to articulate your ideas,
Yeah.
and also being able to listen to how other people can make your ideas better.
Mm.
And I've been able to experience that in both good ways and bad ways. But that'd be my number one thing. And I think the one thing I always say, and I'll leave you with that, is
Yep.
be comfortable with rejection and
Mm.
failure
I love it.
because it happens. And the more you can just get through that and like learn from it and pick yourself up and move forward, you'll realize down the road that all those rejections and all those failures, like they weren't as dramatic as you thought they were at the
Mm.
time,
For
that
sure.
they were just like a little piece of the puzzle.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Tivoli Audio at Tivoli or tivoliaudio.com.